At the same time, the Ministry of Finance has distanced itself from a recent opinion piece written by its advisor, Professor Chris Malikane. Malikane called for the nationalization of banks and mines as part of economic transformation efforts. The Treasury says nationalization is not government policy. Dr. Azar Jamime is the chief economist of Econometrix. He now joins us via Skype for more on this. Dr. Jamime, thank you so much for joining us. Now, what do you make of the suggestions coming from a senior advisor within the Finance Ministry?
I think it's a very unfortunate development to have seen that article, not because one is trying to be very biased in favor of a capitalist system, but the trouble is that at the moment the country is trying to fight the possibility of further credit ratings downgrades, and one needs to add immediately that the worst has certainly not been seen yet, because even with Standard & Poor's, the country's local currency debt is still one notch above junk status. We are still investment grade, and so we haven't seen the worst in terms of capital outflows. And to suddenly see this appointment of a principal economic advisor to the Minister of Finance recommending nationalization of mines, banks, and insurance companies, talking very anti-business in terms very much against big business and so-called white monopoly capital, and calling for land expropriation without compensation is certainly not going to endear investors to and provide confidence to improve investment in the country.
Now, Dr. Jamime, as you mentioned, the fact that the timing of this piece in the press is very interesting with regards to the fact that the finance minister is going over to the US to ensure investors that South Africa is a stable country and economy to invest in. Should we be reading between the lines?
I think we should be reading in between the lines that there is certainly an attempt to denigrate the ability of the Minister of Finance to try and pursue a policy of fiscal discipline, and one that is aligned to the wishes of the investment community, both domestically and abroad. In fact, the coincidence was so dramatic that one might even talk about a conspiracy to try and stymie the Minister of Finance's efforts to sell South Africa abroad. Having said that, one has to recognize that skepticism about the Minister of Finance is not going to die away very soon. This is just one of many areas of skepticism. The former areas of skepticism surround the performance of the current Minister of Finance when he was Minister of Public Enterprises, that coincided with the beginning of a perceptible decline in the governance and management of such enterprises. He also became notorious in terms of trying to pushing through legislation on foreign tourists getting visas that was fairly draconian and led to a very sharp decline in foreign tourism in South Africa in 2015. So he has not covered himself with glory. And on top of that, he has been seen to be aligned to the environment of patronage surrounding President Zuma. And so the suspicion exists that he has been appointed in place of Pravin Gordhan in order to facilitate deals, including a massive nuclear deal, that might benefit those close to the president at the expense of the country's well-being.
So is it safe to say that this is more about the new Minister of Finance basically showing himself who he is with regards to the investors who are likely to invest in South Africa? So is it more about the individual and how things were done, or is it about South Africa's economy?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the Minister of Finance may have received a shock in terms of the initial response to his appointment as Minister of Finance, when 3 days later we had our first credit rating downgrade to junk status. And so he is trying to rehabilitate the country's image, but also to try and establish a decent image for himself as the new Minister of Finance. But it's a very tall order, given the huge amount of skepticism that has been built around his appointment. And I think it's going to be a very long process. Even if he does the right things, it's going to take a very long time to restore investor confidence. We're talking about many months, if not years.
Now, Dr. Jammine, the issues of nationalization, it has been doing rounds for quite some time now, and Treasury has distanced itself from this. Are we heading to a point of nationalization?
Well, the question that people need to ask is, why was Malusi Gigaba appointed Minister of Finance in place of someone who was anti-nationalization and was perceived to be reasonably friendly towards the idea of a market economy? And then to come and see an article like that of the new economic advisor recommending nationalization of so many sectors of the economy, and quite strongly, and coming out against the business sector. It really is a tall order that the new Minister of Finance has to try and rebuild harmony and to rebuild the confidence that the public sector and the private sector will work together for the improvement of the South African economy. Under Pravin Gordhan, there was a gargantuan effort by him, together with the CEOs of major corporations, to improve South Africa's image abroad. And that whole effort of over a year was shattered in one fell swoop with a cabinet reshuffle. And now the replacement seems to be wanting to try and repeat the exercise. But then people ask, well, what was the whole cabinet reshuffle all about, if not to introduce new policies that are far more socialist and far more invasive to the business community?
Now, do you think investors will listen to Minister Gigaba?
I think they may listen to him, but I think they are likely to maintain a lot of skepticism. The real key issue is whether South Africa will see further downgrades in its credit rating. We are told that the minister is now going to meet with Moody's, who are the one rating agency yet to take a decision and who have warned in the sense that they might downgrade us. And right now, the only rating agency to have downgraded South African local currency debt to junk status has been Fitch. And Fitch is not regarded quite as reputably as Standard & Poor's or Moody's. And more importantly, tracker funds that are invested in the World Government Bond Index are watching this very closely, because if Standard & Poor's and Moody's were to downgrade our local currency debt to junk status, many of these investors will then be forced to sell out of South African government bonds, and that would see a massive outflow of capital, some estimated to be, amount to potentially more than $10 billion or 140 billion rand to flow out of the country if that event were to take place. And Gigaba's objective, I assume, is to try and ensure that we don't get that extra downgrade of our local currency debt to junk status that would see these large-scale outflows materializing.
Now, Dr. Jammine, let's just go back to the issue of nationalization. Would nationalization augur well for the South Africa's economy?
I think that it could be extremely damaging for the simple reason that if you look at government intervention in some advanced economies, and even in economies such as Singapore, it was very prominent and helped to uplift those economies. But why? Because prior to nationalization and during the process, the government embarked upon a massive and very spirited attempt at improving the education and skills of the people in those countries. And one fears that the level of education of government officials in South Africa is well below what is required to pull it off in terms of government intervention.
Dr. Jamine, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there for now. That was Dr. Azar Jamine, the chief economist of Econometrix, joining us via Skype.